welcome all of you, our esteemed panelists and our esteemed guests. I'm going to read out a little bit of setting the context for why we're talking about the locally developed choices for the nationally determined contributions, and then I will hand over my mic to our panelists. I stand before you today in a world at a critical juncture, a world facing the ever-escalating threat of climate change. The urgency of our collective actions has never been more evident. And as we convene here in Dubai for COP28, it is crucial that we acknowledge the transformative power of locally developed choices in shaping a sustainable future. In the vast landscape of climate initiatives, the NDCs have undoubtedly laid the groundwork for global efforts. However, it is equally imperative that we recognize the pivotal significance of locally developed choices. The Indian Network on Ethics and Climate Change proudly stands as a proponent of this bottom-up approach, understanding that the true strength lies in empowering communities through climate education, access to climate finance, and conducive policy. The LDCs, locally developed choices, embody a paradigm shift, a departure from the top-down approach to one that is rooted in the communities themselves. They represent a powerful force, enabling communities to implement solutions tailored to their unique needs. Beyond the confines of national targets, these LDCs foster ownership and engagement, leveraging local knowledge for culturally sensitive, socially relevant, and innovative solutions. The essence of LDCs lies in harnessing local innovation and fostering people-centric solutions for a climate-just future. By providing a platform for communities to adapt to climate change, the LDCs ensure that actions are grounded in local realities. This approach is not just about addressing climate change. It is about climate justice. It focuses on building resilience and enhancing adaptive capacities, particularly for marginalized communities, ensuring that no one is left behind in the face of climate change. Moreover, the vital role of green startups and small green businesses cannot be overstated. These entities contribute not only to a new ecosystem of green entrepreneurship and green skilling, but also to mitigation, adaptation, and disaster response. Their innovative approaches hold the potential to create green jobs and facilitate locally and socially just transition towards sustainability. Integration is key. Integrating LDCs into the NDCs bridges the gap between national commitments and local realities, fostering a harmonious relationship between national and local efforts. This alignment maximizes the impact of climate action, creating a truly sustainable future that encompasses the diverse needs and challenges of communities around the globe. In our pursuit of climate resilience, education, finance, and policy form a dynamic nexus that is instrumental in nurturing climate-resilient communities. INECC's experience over time has revealed that the LDCs as a dynamic force in the realm of sustainable development and climate action. They operate as a bottom-up mechanism, empowering communities to contribute actively to climate resilience and adaptation, preparing them for future climate risks. The success of these LDCs hinges on well-informed and empowered communities possessing the knowledge and skills to address local climate challenges. Climate education and literacy is fundamental for fostering a sense of ownership among community members, enabling informed decisions, and actively shaping their climate future. Additionally, the indispensable role of climate finance in amplifying the impact of the LDCs cannot be overstated. Financial resources are crucial for initiating and scaling up sustainable climate actions tailored to unique community needs. Access to climate finance is the key to unlocking the potential of these LDCs, transforming them into a powerful force for sustainable development and climate action. Furthermore, recognizing the vital role of conducive policy in creating an environment for successful LDCs implementation is imperative. Policies at various levels must align with and support locally developed choices to maximize the effectiveness. A conducive policy provides the necessary framework and support for LDCs to thrive and contribute significantly to a sustainable future. And so today, my dear friends, our esteemed panel over here will share about their work, their successes, their challenges, and how the integration of climate education, climate finance, and conducive policy as catalysts for the LDCs has emerged as a robust strategy for climate-proofing our future. So I want to introduce you to our panelists. We have Dr. Priyadarshini Karve, who has completed her PhD in physics from the University of Pune in 1998. Her first research projects resulted in the development of a process for converting agricultural waste into charcoal. The technology won the Ashton Award for Renewable Energy in 2002. In a career spanning nearly 25 years, Dr. Karve invented a number of improved biomass burning cooking devices to reduce smoke in the kitchen and dependence on firewood for domestic cooking in rural areas. She has also worked on decentralized organic waste to fuel technologies. She developed a methodology for technology selection and promotion to improve adoption of clean cooking energy devices by end users. And in the past 10 years or so, her work has also focused on devising and promoting strategies for low-carbon sustainable urbanization. Today, she is representing her organization Clean, as she is the CEO of Clean. We have next Kanika Verma from Development Alternatives. Kanika is the Associate Vice President of the Development Alternatives Group and leads their green and inclusive entrepreneurship vertical. Kanika is deeply committed to driving social innovation and systemic change. Her passion lies in building bridges from grassroots work to global discourse on inclusive innovation, entrepreneurship, and the future of work. Kanika is also part of the Schwab Foundation working group for building the social economy in India. In her current role, she spearheads a social innovation platform, Action and Learning, to boost job growth for women and youth in India. Kanika also leads initiatives geared towards the energy transition of rural micro-enterprises, driven by women collectives. Additionally, she is also a co-founder of Systems Play, a collaborative platform dedicated to nurturing experimentation and learning among system innovators. We have next with us, right in the middle, blessed among all women, Rakesh Warrior from BIF. Mr. Rakesh Warrior is a program director and regional director at BIF Development Research Center. BIF is a reputed development organization and research institution working in the domain of sustainable rural development for over 5 decades and has presence across 14 states of India, covering 5 million households in more than 100,000 villages. Currently, he heads BIF's East region covering 4 states. Rakesh is an engineer by training with an advanced degree in planning and development from the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. We have next with us Cindy Lee Cloet from VESA. Cindy has over 12 years of experience in creating enabling spaces for education for sustainable development. Growing up on the plains of Namakwaland, Cindy understands the importance of the interconnectedness of humans and nature. Selected as one of the first Mandela Washington Fellows and an active member of the Educational Sustainable Development Team, ExpertNet, she gained experience in global North-South and global South-South collaborative approaches to bring about holistic and sustainable solutions to social and environmental challenges. And last but not the least, we have Devleena Bhattacharjee of Climacrew. Devleena is the COO of Climacrew, is a data scientist and a serial tech entrepreneur with 16 years plus years of experience across multiple domains of data science application. In all her startups, Devleena and her team work on the downstream applications of spatial data, climate, and coastal models. She is FICCI, which is the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Fish Tech chairperson, and a board member of the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management. So I welcome all of you, and we're excited to hear from you. And I'm going to hand over the mic and the presentation to Priya.
Thank you. Thank you, Myron. So it's great to be here and to represent Clean Energy Access Network. I have recently taken over as CEO, and I'm going to today emphasize the power of decentralized renewable energy as a holistic climate solution. Clean is a non-profit organization based in India, and we are essentially an industry association. There are about 200 plus members who are primarily entrepreneurs operating in the decentralized renewable energy space. We have to start off, I think, by appreciating that the understanding of DRE has evolved over the years. In 1990s, it was primarily about providing basic energy access to places where it is difficult for, let's say, the grid to reach or the LPG cylinders to be transported, or energy access for vulnerable communities. So this was sort of a postscript in the overall energy story. Slowly, projects started coming up around rural electrification and rural household cooking energy security and so on. However, in the last few years, the understanding of DRE has further broadened, and now we also have distributed renewable energy, which is distributed generation, but the use is centralized. And now I think it is high time we start thinking about DRE as a centerpiece of the renewable energy transition, because this is the way forward for low carbon energy security for everybody. In order to highlight this point, let me give you some examples of how DRE works for climate adaptation to start with, which is an area where large RE doesn't really have much to do. For example, quality of life energy services can be provided through local energy harvesting and local energy service creation. Cooking energy is a very good example of that, where either solar cookers or fuels which are based on locally available biomass can be used now cleanly. There are technologies available for that. Local livelihood generation is possible both in rural and urban setting. A solar powered variety of tools can be used for production by women's self-help groups or other micro enterprises. Also, a number of civic services can be provided using DRE. For example, rooftop solar for schools, primary health centers, and so on. And disaster response. Cyclone shelters, for example, powered by solar energy is just one example that I can talk about. Apart from that, obviously, any renewable energy installation is also providing mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. These are just some examples. We have either very low or zero carbon emissions during use in most of these technologies. Disposal of waste generated at the end of life is also more manageable because you have less. So for example, if you have a large solar farm, then you will suddenly have to dispose of a large number of PV panels at the end of life. Whereas in a distributed situation, you are generating small amount of waste, and therefore local systems can manage this. This is also something that we have to start considering now that we are decades into renewable energy installations. And the most important thing is that DRE systems have a much lower ecological footprint and produce much less disruption of local communities. And this is the big difference between large RE and DRE systems. While large megawatt scale installations are very good for rapid and substantial climate change mitigation, However, this leads to large land use change. And many times we find that shepherds are using the land that they are using for grazing, or access to water and fuel to village commons are being cut off because of these large RE systems. Whereas DRE systems, as I just now talked about, can provide you with mitigation as well as adaptation. They can help build climate resilience. However, rapid replication is going to be a challenge. But these systems blend very easily with existing natural ecosystems. Land use change is not involved to that extent. Also blends very well with human-made infrastructure like rooftop solar systems, for example. And this is the great way to provide local energy security and local livelihood generation, which is also very, very significantly important for just transition. And therefore, I feel, and this is based on the way we look at India. India, while it is one of the highest emitters at this point in time, it is also one of the countries most vulnerable to climate change. And yet, India's NDC says nothing about dealing with those vulnerabilities. And same is the story with other emerging economies. So we feel that there must be, in the upcoming NDCs, there must be ambitious targets for DRE-based local initiatives, both for adaptation and resilience building, and also ambitious targets for DRE in the plan for carbon neutrality that these countries are setting up. And of course, we need policy and financial support for innovation in DRE technologies. We have a dearth of qualified talent in this sector, which will come if there are enabling policies and if there are financial incentives. Our commitment from CLEAN, along with our members, we would like to be an important solutions provider for a climate-ready India. And of course, we would also handhold similar organizations in other parts of the developing world for DRE entrepreneurs to come together and contribute to addressing climate change in their respective countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Priya, for highlighting this whole renewable energy and DRE, the impacts on climate mitigation, adaptation, as well as disaster risk management. And we have at INECC have also seen that how these large-scale renewable energy projects or solutions have had livelihood impacts on communities. And bringing the renewable energy DRE systems to the forefront, I think, will enhance this whole just transition as well as green skilling for communities that all of us are working with. We are open to taking 2 questions now, and we will also have questions that can be taken later also. So if anybody has any questions or something from the floor that you all would like to share with regards to Priya's presentation. Introduce yourself as well.
Yes, hello. My name is Alan Bigelow. I'm with Solar Cookers International.
Hi, Alan.
Yes, hello. And I appreciated the remarks. And my question, I'm wondering about the approach for these, the DRE, where there is some level of infrastructure that is then tapped into. So it's beyond the household level, but smaller than the larger region. How much effort needs to be placed in training and maintenance of systems to ensure that they will endure? Okay.
No,
yes,
that's a very good question, because the moment you have distributed of any technology, then at every unit you need to ensure that proper maintenance is taken care of and that system keeps on working efficiently. And that is where this whole idea of green skilling comes in, where providing that service and maintenance can then become a livelihood generation activity also for local communities. And that is why I feel that DRE has a great potential, not just for creating new jobs, but also for just transition. Because if you are going into a renewable energy based energy system in a locality, which means that some people who are involved with the conventional energy system will need to change their skills and shift into these new jobs. So that also can happen in a more effective way if it is happening on a smaller scale.
Thank you. Anybody else? Couple.
Did I hear you saying something about India's emission being one of the highest? Can you please clarify that?
No, India's annual emissions are highest, and that is why there is so much pressure on India to keep on talking about reducing emissions.
Okay, not
but
per capita. Not per capita. You're talking of.
No, not per capita.
No, I understand.
But I mean, because of time, I can't elaborate on that. But that is exactly a critical issue that we have been raising, that India's NDC actually should be prioritizing adaptation more than mitigation, because our contribution in the larger context is not really that much.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm Judith from Inforce Network, and I think it's incredibly interesting about the cook stoves as part of these NDCs. But as far as I know, presently it is not part of the NDCs.
Yes.
And we from Inforce, we also try to push this. But I just would like to know that what can we do and what you do that actually this will be recognized as part of the NDCs.
Yeah. No, that's my own area of work actually, cook stoves, and this is a hugely complex topic, because cooking is not just one operation, it is multiple operations, and that is why unfortunately it so happens that none of the cook stove labs have a kitchen associated with them. And that is the biggest problem in this sector. People who cook, their voice is not getting into technology development, their voice is not getting into setting the definition of what is to be considered as an efficient and appropriate cook stove. So we at our end are trying to change that. We have developed a system for, in any community, we run a program where we take inputs from people to identify which are the parameters of their cooking energy system that are absolutely critically important for them. And then we look at what technologies are available in the market which will fit into their criteria. So user friendliness, the moment it is brought to the center, the adoption of improved cook stoves increases. That has been our experience. There are now very good technologies even with solid biomass fuels. There have been great strides made in biogas technology, and there is now wide variety of solar cookers which can perform a wide variety of cooking operations even with diffuse sunlight and so on. Unfortunately, the marketing of these technologies is falling short, and that is where enabling policies will definitely help.
Thank you, Priya. I think we'll continue with your conversation later, and welcome, Kanika.
Thanks, Myron. So I'll rapidly start with development alternatives. We've been around for 40 years. Our mission and vision is to work around the three crises, resource, livelihoods, and climate. But for us, it's the intersection of these spaces that's the most interesting. We're always looking at innovative solutions where, for example, livelihood security meets climate resilience, or where resource efficiency meets ecosystem restoration, or all of them meet together to create what we call sustainable livelihoods. Just a rapid view of what the national determined contributions for India means, which is very similar to the other contexts as well. We have tall targets that we've set for ourselves, where we have enhanced investments as well as net zero emissions by 2070. Whereas we are forgetting a little bit of our context if we don't think of people or local solutions. In a country where 90% of people work in the informality space, It's not going to be just the large businesses or the large solutions that are going to help this transition. I think there's a lot of local innovations. Priya also sort of emphasized that, and how we can foster a culture is going to be extremely important. And people's participation along with the traditional knowledge that they build is going to be extremely critical. And for development alternatives, one of the response is to build what we call green and inclusive microeconomies, these engines of local innovation and community action. What do we even mean by green and inclusive microeconomy is to actually shift millions of job seekers to job makers. We have a growing livelihood crisis, and while we look at climate solutions, it's extremely important to address that. Otherwise, we're walking into another large crisis. This photograph, for me, really signifies what communities can do, where this lady has empowered not just herself and her family, but many other women, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. An approach to a locally developed solution requires a bottom-up approach of deep listening. I think Priya emphasized that a lot. How do you make sure that you seek to even understand and empathize with the communities, and then co-create or prototype these solutions, these locally developed solutions that can be then accelerated? There's a strong emphasis of learning and knowledge building based on the evidence that's been generated that can be shared. Just a little bit of a shift from a step-by-step process of creating these microeconomies or local entrepreneurship to a more systemic approach, which is very much looking at the changes that are required at the behavior, ecosystem, and the policy level. These are some of the values that we believe are extremely important. While we're listening to voices, extremely important is the ones that are being left behind the most. Women, young people, anyone having a unique identity whose voice needs to be heard. We need solutions that are adaptive. It's not about just taking a solution to another context, but actually respecting the other context and taking the approach behind that solution. And of course, has to be extremely dynamic, where we're constantly learning and building knowledge. These are just 3 solutions that I want to highlight, which are locally developed solutions. How do you shift from global flows to sustainable local chains? Integrated fishery and poultry enterprise at a very micro scale enables two of these verticals for an entrepreneur, an agri-entrepreneur to bring together. One's waste actually becomes the other part's resource, and can reduce the reduction along with the waste of cost as well. The second I want to highlight is that it becomes very overwhelming when you look at the tall targets that we've developed. But it's not just one solution or a couple of solutions. It's actually these multiple micro movements that are being spurred by these locally developed solutions that can unlock these. 100,000 women have access to safe mobility and healthcare facilities the last 2 years just because of a 100 women e-rickshaw network in a place called Mirzapur. The third is, of course, alternative innovative technologies, which Priya highlighted quite a bit, where not only are we looking at local solutions, but also a practice to policy connect. Entire value chains where we're looking at the changes that are needed. What does a green microeconomy look like? And I just want to highlight a district in one of the most backward areas in India, where entrepreneurs in the communities are taking charge of these solutions. Women's institutions are building on the assets and the solidarity that has been there to be at the forefront of innovative solutions. And this is what we call the Mirzapur experiment, where in this district, what I want to highlight is that not only 98% of the enterprises continue to sustain after COVID, but we also have 90% of them from marginalized communities. But what I really want to draw attention to is this graph, where you can see, ladies and gentlemen, that as rapidly as the enterprises grow and the jobs grow, the investment that's required from a solution starts going down. The communities start taking charge of those solutions, and that's extremely critical when we think of investments that we need to make. Just a last thought on what we need in terms of mainstreaming or amplifying the impact. again, just want to highlight the local innovation and the mixing of the traditional knowledge, but also enabling partners to play a very strong horizontal role. Collective action, or rather radical collaboration, is going to be the key to unlock. Cross-sectoral collaboration, along with each one of us looking at how we can collaborate with the communities. One of the things that we're wondering a lot about is how do you get community institutions to collaborate with you and take solutions into their own hands, where you're no longer even required to be a solution provider, but move towards more of a facilitator. Credits continues to be a challenge, but again, could we look at an aggregation of these kind of solutions or entrepreneurs where we could have innovative forms of credit in the delivery or in the instruments that have been created? Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Kanika, and I think your recommendation that made notes over here from your earlier slides in terms of, co-creating solutions with traditional knowledge and experience and the whole systemic change, the old and the new in terms of what needs to be done, and your recommendations in terms of all those steps that you put. I think that's a very good way and a good model for all of us that we could look at in terms of bringing about this change. We'll take two questions from the floor before we move to Rakesh. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm an assistant professor from Harvard University of Institute of Technology, Harvard, Shenzhen in China. So my question is about the green jobs that you see that maybe my experience in China that we find that maybe, that China is a coal intensive country, so that the transition from the coal to the renewable energy may cause the job losses or the net employment losses in China. So that maybe China needs to do more and take more actions to achieve this just transition. So I'm quite interested about the situation in India, that the transition from the traditional fossil fuels to the renewable energy will lead to the net employment loss or the net employment increase. Thank you.
I feel like, Priya, you should answer
Yeah,
this question. You answer and I'll add a little bit in terms of for the larger context. Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
yes, this is a problem that we share actually, both India and China, as we shift away from coal towards renewable energy. And that is exactly the point I was making, that instead of large RE, if we go to decentralized renewables, then there is automatically more job creation. And that is where everybody who is losing jobs in the coal sector can be absorbed. Of course, there has to be a retraining and all of that process has to be involved, and it is going to take money as well as infrastructure to make that happen.
And also to add to is this whole aspect of green skilling, which in terms of what are those new spaces that young people or even older people should be looking at in terms of retraining themselves and reskilling themselves.
Also, climate change is creating new jobs. So, for example, carbon accountants is something that was not heard of before, but now we need thousands of those people if we have to track carbon neutrality targets that all companies and academic institutions and countries are setting themselves. So there are these new openings that are also coming up because of climate change.
So a bit more generic point on this. I feel like India, in our context, I feel like we're missing a step in development, which is to focus a little bit more on manufacturing. And I feel like a lot can get unlocked by this. It's something that I wonder about a lot. One of the things we've noticed with our entrepreneurs is that 65% of the products and services are actually sold locally. These communities are trying to become self-sufficient.
Yes.
And take an example of potato chips. This is my favorite example. We actually have a local potato chips manufacturing, which people now prefer. And in the other context, we're always talking about how do you take a large company who produces potato chips to become much more sustainable, and those potatoes get sent to the large company, get sent back into the communities, and we're trying to solve that problem. Whereas if we took a more stronger jobs approach or a a sustainability approach through these local decentralized manufacturing units, we might be able to sort of complement that with the large. I'm not saying large businesses are going to go away, but I'm saying is that we'll have to sort of complement that. Another point I wanted to mention is that I think the way the world is moving towards digitization as well as technology, I think we do have to keep into account how people learn now. It's no longer a training and a capacity building kind of approach, but building an ecosystem and people learning with each other. And I think there's an opportunity there for learning new skills, but also people connecting with people to sort of create new jobs.
So, so we have similar experience because we are involved in agri-residue-based briquette making and supplying that as a substitute for industrial boilers. This is a transition that is compulsory because now the fossil fuels as it is are limited and nature has started showing its limit. So whether we like it or not, the shift has to happen. Only temporarily it can be staggered. It doesn't have to be in day one. It can be staggered. So that is one. And another thing is like there are several other options, but so far not much innovations have gone into it. Like for agri-residues, like we have to, there are practices like burning of agri-residues. So that is again contributing to pollution. And also, so that's easy way for farmers. But then there are agri-residues which can have very good calorific values. So I think that can generate the new jobs in rural economies and an entire supply chain can be established around it. So as I think both Priya and Kanika said, the shift has to happen, ecosystem has to be created, but I think it will take some time. But it will have to be adopted, yeah.
Yeah, this gradual thing, I think it is the way to go. I mean, otherwise it's going to be a shock for everybody as well.
It has to be staggered,
Yeah.
very right. Yeah, I am,
You can tell again.
You would just introduce
myself
yourself.
Dr. Rajeshri Joshi, I am also program director in BIOF.
Hi everyone. My name is Srashtant. I'm Kanika's colleague. Thank you, Myron. Thank you, panelists. And thank you for that wonderful question because I think it puts the spotlight on exactly the kind of change we need, not just in perspective, but in terms of action. At the cost of oversimplification, if you put in 1,000 megawatts, right, at one location and try and ship that electricity, into households, you're treating people like consumers, right? You will lose jobs, right? If, however, you look at that from the perspective of production and you distribute those 1,000 megawatts over 10,000 locations and that energy is available for people to produce, goods and services, then you're actually creating more jobs. So thank you for that question. I think it's a fundamentally different approach that we have to take.
Thanks. We can take that next, and after everybody's done. Rakesh, on to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Myron. Greetings from BIOF. Glad to be part of this event and appreciate all of you being here for this session. In the context of this side event on locally developed choices for nationally determined contributions, I'll be speaking on the subject as building from below, which are BIOF's experiences in India on climate actions. I'll follow this presentation sequence. Since I'll be speaking about BIOF's experience, I'll take a minute to say about the organization. BIOF has been founded on Gandhian philosophy of rural prosperity, and we have been engaged in sustainable rural development for over 5 decades, more than 56 years now. The vision is building a self-reliant rural society, and with the mission of creating opportunities of gainful self-employment, which the earlier speakers highlighted the importance of that, ensuring sustainable livelihood, enriched environment, all core focus themes of the session. We are working with almost 4 million families every year, covering 100,000 villages in 343 districts and 14 states of India. The core programs are livestock-based livelihoods and enteric methane emission reduction, water-centric livelihoods for land degradation neutrality, sustainable natural resource management, and soil carbon enrichment, tree-based farming and climate-resilient dry land agriculture, climate action, these are specifically focusing on livelihoods with also emphasis on climate action, And there are some climate action programs as well, both on adaptation, mitigation, biodiversity, nature-based solutions, and renewable energy. And then there are some cross-cutting programs also on empowerment, health, and farmer organizations. And we work with multiple partners, and specifically in the context of climate actions, we are a member of the Green Credit Committee, which India declared officially in COP. Honorable Prime Minister declared it. We are part of that committee. And on NDMAs, the National Disaster Management Authorities, drought mitigation projects, and about climate proofing, and CGIAR projects on climate actions. To set the context, India's NDS is at a glance, core principles I won't quantify since Kanika already took us through some of those specific aspects. So it's on reducing, if you see you all are well aware of the NDS, the first one and the updated one. So it's on reducing emissions intensity, clean energy generation, carbon sequestration, resilience building, which is the adaptation part, resource mobilization for this, for taking up, for executing this NDSs, and capacity development. So the three pillars, if you can say, or the core principles, it's on enhancing citizens' living standards, at the same time ensuring nation's progress and the planet's health. And no aspect of this can be overlooked, and we cannot allow trade-offs as well. So in this context, specific, I'll be speaking about 3 experiences or initiatives of in participatory climate action pathways. So one is on livestock management. The second is on clean energy, which Dr. Karve already took us through in detail, so I'll not go into the detail. And the third is on land-based livelihoods. So first, efficient livestock management. So what is the context that I'm trying to address? As you all know, in specific to India, livestock contributes almost 58% of emissions in agriculture. And bovines are the large ruminants. They are the major enteric emitters. At the same time, we have the highest bovine population of over 300 million, but the productivity is extremely low. It's almost 1/3 of the global average of mixed systems. We have higher breeding overhead, that is the non-productive to productive ratio, which is almost in the range of 60:40. And then, of course, fodder scarcity. So in this context, what BIF has tried to address and what approach it has taken is scientific breed improvement through grassroots network of livestock development centers. And that is where the locally developed choices come into the picture. So we have this grassroots network of local self-employed youth who provide the services of ensuring that the scientifically breed improvement is taken up at the farmers' doorsteps. The second is herd optimization by adoption of very advanced sex sorting technology, but taken up at the farmers' level. So very advanced technology, innovative, cutting-edge technology, which is developed at the lab level, but taken up, implemented at the farmer level. And we all know the problem of non-productive cattle, be it the non-productive male cattle. So it's a social nuisance also. So how it has to be scientifically tackled. So this takes care of that. Ensuring feed supplements which are in terms of anti-methanogenic field supplements. Improved fodder varieties, resilient fodder varieties. We have fodder cactus, so for dryland areas, semi-arid areas, we have fodder cactus specifically suited to those areas. And then having in situ fodder preservation so that around the year the farmers can have green fodder. Then we have participatory genomic evaluation for adaptive trait identification. Again, genomic evaluation, very cutting edge technology, but through participatory process, we take that up in the field with the farmers. And of course, native and indigenous breed conservation, which have better adaptive traits. So this is the local self-employment model that I was mentioning, reaching out to the farmers' doorstep. And as you can see, it's the nondescript curve in the improved breed over the next 1 or 2 generations of that cattle. So what is the contribution potential? In terms of, we have almost 4,500 livestock development centers throughout the country. So it has a mitigation potential of almost 8 megatons or million tons of carbon, CO2 equivalent, which is roughly 9% of overall mitigation potential of Indian agriculture. And as I mentioned, local self-employment integrated with quality service delivery and viable livelihoods. The second is clean energy. As I already mentioned, I'll not go into the details as Dr. Karve already took us through, but I'll run it through for the benefit of for discussion. The per capita energy consumption of India is again very low, about 0.6 tons oil equivalent against the global average, which is almost 3 times higher. 300 million people do not have access to electricity. The annual per capita electricity use is almost 1,200 kilowatt hours. And there is vast spatial disparity. And we have set an ambitious target of 500 gigawatt of generation through renewable sources by 2030. So to address this, what can we take up? Of course, DREs, which Dr. Karve very nicely mentioned. And we have been working in DREs on solar and bio domains. It is important to connect the 3 A's, which is the availability, accessibility, and affordability, if we have to promote DREs on a wider scale. And we focus on productive applications. I don't mean to say that there are other applications which are in the nature of welfare applications. Those are equally important, but productive applications have more viability in terms of taking it up without much support. So for enhanced cost efficiency and effectiveness. And the aim is to ensure that the farmers have, so those are familiar with the Indian system, so it's primarily rain-fed system which is focusing, which is dependent on one season of agriculture, the rain-fed agriculture. So we can ensure that the farmer gets additional season of cultivation. Focus on small capacity pumps. The fractional power solar pump is something which Biofest in-house developed, so that again the viability is enhanced in terms of the initial cost. This is the point number 6, integrated renewable energy and sustainable agriculture is on the biogas part, which is on household level biogas, but the focus here is as important as the gas is important is the slurry value addition for organic manure production at decentralized level. And then we do have decentralized solar-based food processing as well.
Rakesh, you have 2 minutes.
Yes. So the contribution potential, again, I'll not go into the details. So as I mentioned, it has, and just to give the solar-powered water lifting installations that Biofest has done, almost to the tune of cumulatively more than 1 megawatt, which results in an annual saving of 400,000 liters of fossil fuel. So that is the quantity which we can attain. The third is a land-based livelihood program, which is the Biofest tree-based farming system model, which is for small holding, subsistence farming, degraded lands. So there's a combination of medium gestation, high resilience, and short gestation, high returns cropping. It's a holistic approach rather than taking it up sectorally. Local resources, we again discussed the local knowledge creation, participatory engagement, aligned with natural farming principles, value addition, linkages, these are all taken up. Again, the contribution potential, I need not elaborate. So there's a carbon sequestration potential of almost 24 tons per hectare or 9 CRs per year per hectare. Now linking LDCs to NDCs. So if we have to link that, so we need to have replicable, scalable models which can complement NDCs. NDC lays emphasis on last mile outreach. Funding, yes, to a certain extent, it is sometimes a problem, but then we can explore carbon financing, ESG, green credit. The scale, it needs to be in this scale if it has to make a meaningful contribution. And we can explore viability gap funding, which is more accessible than complete support. Cost efficiency, cost effectiveness, both are important. And last but not the least, the role of citizens in climate actions, which is actually enshrined in the Constitution and even very specifically mentioned in the NDC as well. So with this, I would like to take a pause by saying that the choices made today determine the future derived tomorrow. Thank you. I would be glad to take any questions, interact, and request also to go through our website for more details, which is kept here. Thank you.
Thanks. Rakesh, I think this interesting, the universe that you've created with the livestock and the clean energy and the livelihoods and the kind of, I was very impressed in terms.
Systems always get spoken about like it was in the past. Those people are still alive today, and how do we make their voices heard in a way that actually like levels them up to all of the scientific knowledges that's produced today? So I'm going to speak from that kind of context as we go through this. So this is South Africa today. More and more we kind of like see these news reports, droughts, floods, fires in one specific area over a period of like 6 months. That's the climate extremes that are actually happening now in South Africa. A lot of you know Cape Town, right? Yes. Cape Town a couple of years ago were almost like, I think it was 23 days away from day 0. That was when the taps were going to run dry. I don't know which god we prayed to, but the rain came eventually. But day 0, these are the kind of things that are now being more spoken about, like basically experienced, and the kind of like lived reality is one of like climate emergency and climate consequence on a daily basis. Last year, that specific headline really kind of like solidified what it means to live in a climate crisis in South Africa when 400 people died over a space of like 2 days from floods in Durban, KZN, and KwaZulu-Natal. So the severity, the frequency has improved, but the severity also, and now we are losing lives, and people can directly relate that to the impact of climate change. I'm happy to say that, you know, South Africa we have some really good scientists, we have some really good NGOs and spaces that work towards it, and it's probably too small to see, but what we've started to like do is actually like look at each of the provinces or the different states in South Africa and look at what would it mean if, you know, it's 2 degrees, if we basically like get 2 degree increase, a 3 to 4 degree, and then a 4 degree plus. And the kind of like impacts are really dire for some of the specific areas. And the areas that are mostly affected are areas of very rural, marginalized communities, and they are the ones who are basically like facing or first receivers of the impact of climate change. What I really like about these kind of exercises that South Africa is starting to do now is it looks holistically at a socially, economically, and an environmental impact that these changes will have. And this is where we kind of like determine our locally developed choices from. So if this is the impact, what is it that we need to do at a local level, informed by local communities who've lived there for generations, to actually make sure that we mitigate and adapt to what is coming. So in South Africa, we have very, very good policies. I continuously speak about this. We've got climate action plans at the regional and national level. We've got strategies and policies that really look at biodiversity, the skills component, greening of skills for youth and communities, but also in the current job sectors. And then we've got national strategies that basically like look at the overarching guidance and policies. However, our South African government has like a 3-tiered approach. We've got local, we've got provincial, or some people would call it state, and then we've got national. And where implementation really matters is at a local level. We produce these policies at a national and a provincial level, and we hand them down to the local to say, you must implement this with no guidance. And this is where the problem actually lies. The reason for this is because the reason why we need to focus on local government so that locally developed choices can be efficient and effective is because in our constitution it says that our local governments are responsible for the sustainable delivery of services, the protection of natural environment for the benefit of present and current future generations, and then the risk or the need to respond to disasters and risk management at a local level. National only draws up the policies. The implementation sits at the local level, and that's where the gap is. Local level, stronger focus on implementation because they are so closer to communities and youth on the ground. But this is currently not the case, and it's not happening. And that's why a lot of the locally developed choices are not feeding into the NDC because there's that gap in terms of like that structure. So if we talk about the just energy transition in South Africa, the 4 sectors that have been identified that will immediately have to be worked on is obviously the coal. So I'm happy for that question that was asked because a lot of like the 80,000 direct jobs in mining will be affected as soon as we start moving towards that transition. So a lot of people are becoming quite nervous, in particular provinces in South Africa where mining is huge, the Northern Cape, Mpumalanga, those are the 2 big ones. How do we kind of like shift and what do we do with these people? How do we upskill them in terms of like new jobs within those kind of spaces? The automotive space, a lot of people are now moving towards, you know, hybrid cars. What is the other? Electric cars. South Africa doesn't have the infrastructure for that yet. But we supply a lot of the Northern Hemisphere parts. And all of a sudden, because the Northern Hemisphere don't want our internal combustion engines anymore, a lot of people are losing their jobs. So the kind of like transition from that space to electric cars, there's a transition that needs to happen that's also not happening fast enough. Agriculture and tourism, you can also see those stats there, and this is kind of like where we are playing as WESA, as an organization at the moment. So just some of the examples that we've highlighted. You've mentioned agriculture. Agriculture is also a huge thing for us. Agriculture for for subsistence. So how do we look at sustainable agriculture projects at the local level to ensure two things? Food sovereignty in local communities, at the same time looking at youth employment so that they can supply for their local communities. So it's locally produced food for local communities, and they don't have to walk 10 kilometers to go and buy at a market. So it's about training them for sustainable agriculture practice. The one thing that's missing here and that's hitting South African youth quite hard is insurance. So if they don't have big businesses, they have small businesses, but if a flood comes, washes away all of their crops, for them to access financing for insurance is very difficult. And that's the kind of thing that I think that we need to look at for both small and big farmers in South Africa. How do we leverage insurance companies so that they can support when these things happen? Ecosystem restoration at community level has been a huge success in South Africa. So that's one example of a wetland that was degraded. And whenever it rained and whenever it flooded, there was a school that would flood every single time. So the kids couldn't go to school because the school flooded, and the community came together and fixed that wetland because it was a priority for them. So for me, also locally developed choices need to be priorities for communities. What do they need for them to be able to contribute to the NDCs? Youth projects, particularly in water. South Africa is a water scarce country. Water projects, citizen science, communities are now becoming what we call community or citizen science volunteers. They submit their data, and it's slowly changing the statistics of South African rivers, but it also gives us an indication of how healthy or unhealthy South African rivers are, and we can actually then do something about it. Ecotourism is a huge thing, both from an economic but also a cultural thing for South African youth. 1 minute, eh?
Yeah.
So a huge focus for us is looking at ecotourism projects in terms of youth development, cultural preservation, and for us to be able to tell our stories. So some of the young people in these photos have created guided tours to explore their natural heritage, to show people their natural heritage, and at the same time it's looking at sustainable livelihoods while taking care of their environment. And then lastly, this is my last slide, I think for me, for locally developed choices to really thrive in South African communities, teachers also need to be at the heart of it. How do we bring teachers together with communities for climate literacy, and then for that scaling up to happen from a school into a community level? Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. And very nice of you to highlight the part of education and creating awareness, not only for teachers as well, but also for the community, in terms of this whole idea of environmental education and adding culture and within your own ecosystem and the values that come with it. And because we have had some experience at our tribal areas also, because we are seeing that these values are getting lost now, and trying to bring it back into the curriculum within the schools, just so that they know and begin to have this biodiversity protection and conservation to it. So thanks. We're open to take questions for Cindy. If not, then I have one question for you, Cindy, in terms of, with regards to the youth in South Africa. Coming back to this indigenous, as I was saying, how do you see it playing now? Because, as I was saying, this experience of the young people now have aspirations of being urbanized and wanting, it's absolutely fair for them to do that. And how do you balance your knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, as well as the contemporary lifestyle that these young people want? And what are the challenges that you face for that?
Yeah, I think for me it's not an either or, but really for them to understand where they come from. In South Africa we have a saying that it's not your route, like a route or a path to rise, but it's your route, your roots to rise. So that is something that we always want to foreground and say, how do you know where you come from? How do you identify with the place and the people that you come from while at the same time aspiring for a better life. So for me, it's not the dualism, but how can we incorporate both
Absolutely.
for them to understand, how to balance their identity with where they want to go as a people.
Superb. And I think that integration is very important. And many of us have lost it also. So,
Can I add something
yes,
about
please
that?
do.
I mean, it's so important what Cindy said, because I think we live with multiple truths,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's important to sort of recognize that and live with those tensions.
Yeah.
And I think if we could just work with young people to be able to do that, I think a lot can sort of get unlocked.
Because if we say to them they need to like leave,
Yeah.
like not even think of that, move on, or just encourage them to move on, there's a kind of like dissonance that happen, like this is who I am, but I want to move this way. So we need to like embrace both sides. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And because again, adding to that, we also see that when they move to that, there's an alienation that happens when they're not here, they're not there also.
Exactly.
And then it leads to this whole area of depression and complete other problems.
Yeah.
So thanks. And last we've got Devleena with us, who is from a very different ecosystem from what else we have been talking about. And the whole idea is that, local solutions are there for everything. And we want to hear from you, Devleena, in terms of your work.
All right. Well, lovely to be here. Good evening to all. And thanks, Myron. And ocean being our last frontier, as only app that I'm the last one to speak about the blue economy. So here, talking about our work with coastal ecosystems, small-scale fisheries, and various other coastal communities in the last 6.5 years. I always begin with a slide that kind of puts in focus the size and potential of this community, because typically in a room of 100 people, I find 10 people who really understand or even are aware of the impacts of the coastal ecosystem. So we are roughly 3 billion people in the world depend on the oceans for a source of direct livelihood, direct and indirect. But oceans or the seas surrounding us are a large scale chance, opportunity for climate mitigation as well, because it's the largest carbon sink and the largest heat sink. From aspects of demography, there are 800 million small-scale fisheries globally, and 47% of that community is represented by women. 90% of small-scale fisheries in developing 90% of fisheries in developing countries are small-scale fisheries. But even though they are small, the impact is large. They contribute to almost 40% of global fish catch. Something that I would like to really highlight here, when you really compare small-scale fisheries to large-scale fishing fleets, their impact on sustainability is much larger, by which I means the entire kind of 80% of cost of fishing fleet is fuel. On small-scale fisheries, use almost 8 times less than large fleet, even though they catch almost the same amount of fish. But also they employ almost 24 times more than large-scale fishing fleet. So when we talk about locally developed solutions or locally developed choices and creating green jobs, that's a big sector that we really need to focus on. I would like to talk about 2 things that we've primarily been doing with this community for the last 6.5 years. We started working with the small-scale fishing communities in addressing their various needs of understanding the local climate, by which I mean that, in the past few years, 20-odd years, given the climate crisis, the entire ecosystem around them has changed. They are having much more higher frequency cyclones, so they are spending way more time out in the ocean, spending way more in cost of fuel, and also coming back with a less fish. So what we really realize that what we need to do here is provide them climate awareness, climate and marine advisories, which can be really adapted and which can they really start using them at their comfort of their home and understand in a way that they really they can. So for these kind of climate interventions, what we had to do is travel to each individual state. India is a kind of a cluster of many different nations. Every state has its own different demography. So we actually had to sit down with these communities, study their own beliefs, their trust barriers, their value systems, and understand what they really need or what they mean when it comes to really understanding, the various parameters of the ocean, the parameters of the weather. So we are a bunch of data scientists. I come from a data scientist background. So what we essentially did is analyze various different satellite-based marine and weather advisories and translate that into insights that they can easily adopt and provide them on a daily basis. And they can use that to really understand when to go, when not to go, where to go in the ocean. One part of this entire experience of working with them is where we realize the community is again facing the brunt of climate change, and there is a large loss of fishing days. Given the climate crisis, given the adverse weather conditions, there are more and more not being able to fish, where we realize there is an immediate need for giving them an alternative source of livelihood, and where our seaweed comes into focus. And seaweed was primarily very important for us because at the end of the day, we were looking at something that they could do locally, where they don't really have to travel out or go to the urban sectors, work as a gig worker. So we were looking for locally developed solutions, something that can be done easily, that is cost effective. What also is very, very, very heartening for us in the seaweed bit is that the last intervention that we talked about, the OFISH app, the primary uses the OFISH app were fishermen. But when it comes to seaweed, out of 20 farmers that works with us, 15 are fisherwomen. So in multiple different ways, seaweed really helped us, not only giving them additional livelihood source, not only giving them, helping us employ more women, but also the fact that the extracts of the seaweed are completely bio-derived, biodegradable, compostable. And this means that we extract value adds out of it that goes into biostimulant and the bioplastic industry. We buy back the material. So in both of these interventions, we provide technical advisories to the communities which they can adapt and use at their end. A part of our intervention is education, providing them hands-on digital literacy so that they can use the app, use the intervention at the end. We have a team of field agents who work with them to really give them or train them in production methods that gives the right optimum output. The last few years of my work with the communities have really helped me identify a couple of the key challenges that I would like to really talk about today. One is lack of information. Second is lack of access, and the third is lack of capital. Some of you have spoken about climate finance and your climate insurance, which is also the same, a very typical case when it comes to the coastal communities. What we see here, at least in the lack of information, is a large market failure. We call it information asymmetry, which typically means that the communities out there, they survive on a lot of information. They need to really go on about their typical day at work. First of it is climate. Given that they're out in the sea, given that they're exposed to the brunts of weather condition much more than the land-based warriors, land-based farmers rather, they really need updated weather information, which we provide in the app. But they also need supply chain information. One of our interventions, we realized that we have to be completely traceable, and traceability enables us to really give them access to understanding what is the market demand like. Some of them don't even know whether, what is the kind of change of seafood habits and habitats happening in the demand ecosystem, so that they can cater to that or address to that. The third bit is also the access to the local market. Market linkages is second thing, but also information on the pricing. Lack of price transparency also ends, makes them end up getting harassed by a lot of middlemen, which really information can help them. So apart from the information, what they really need is market linkages, both backward and forward market linkages. What we mean by backward market linkages is giving them your farm tools, giving them high-grade, cost-effective devices which they can use at their end easily. Like fisherwomen, they can giving them a drying device that they can fish drying device that they can easily procure the local markets, which help them again to sell their fish easily. We have worked on providing them cost-effective storages that really help them, get a much more survival rate of the, fish they caught and then sell in the market whenever, in a flexibility of time. Apart from that, training and upskilling is a big part of it. The fact that we are asking them to move on to sustainable devices, move on to sustainable nets, move on to using our farms for seaweed ecosystem. A big part of our intervention is train the trainers, train the local communities in using the kind of production capacities. Production means the kind of farm tools that we are providing them, and handhold them throughout the entire cycle. So for a seaweed ecosystem, we have a 45-day cycle. We make sure that we train them in the seeding and harvesting, and also throughout the cycle monitoring the seaweed farms. The last bit that I would like to talk about is the access to finance and insurance. Climate finance and climate insurance is a very highly understudied area, typically when it comes to the blue economy. Most of us, or most of the mainstream actors, don't really understand this community. So when you're talking about finance and insurance, the first thing that you need is data. You need the data of the demography, you need the data of the income patterns, their cost patterns, which is completely understudied. So even before talking to the banks, and which we have done, we have failed, is that gathering that data is very important for us. So here, what I would like to really address with the three challenges that I talked about.
Devlina, 1 minute.
Sure, yeah. Three challenges that I talked about, where I see as a well-functioning system, governments, NGOs or civil society organizations and markets play a very integral part, and all of them need to act together. We as startups or corporates bring in the technology, bring in the scale. Civil society organizations or NGOs know their beneficiaries the best. They know what are their challenges, what are their trust barriers, so they can help in the adaptation. But where government can come in is basically to deregulate, de-risk, decentralize, and make sure the interventions are reaching to the grassroots, and the interventions are from the grassroots. So last but not the least, I'll leave you all with a couple of policy suggestions that I believe needs to be addressed to at least, to really empower the blue economy. And I'm not only talking about India. As a part of work, we have worked with the United Nations World Food Programme, and we've identified 67 countries where similar problems exist outside India, and this is similar in many cases to other countries as well. So we need a policy for adaptation, and we need a policy for climate and finance. And in each of them, the need for the policy interventions is to really help in diversifying, help in adopting to new technologies, demystifying new technologies, help in upskilling and training, and also making sure access to finance, access to easy capital is available to these coastal communities without much need from them to really queue up and long bank queues, where they are taught in a way that they understand, where the entire thing about reducing the market power, where large scale organizations, on the market linkages bit, we bring it down to locally developed solutions where they can participate and build the economy together.
Thank you, Devi.
Thank you, Myron.
It was great that you brought this whole government, corporate, and CSO. This thing. It's a very idealistic world. I mean, it would work, but it could work if we change this whole paradigm, for this. And hopefully it can be a model that could be replicated. So, if anybody has any questions for Devlina, I will give you. You want to talk to Devlina? Wait, Purnima.
Hello?
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah. It's audible. No, it's audible.
It's audible, okay. I am from All India Women's Conference and doing the program under socio-economic programs. So we had one unit in Andhra Pradesh. Mm-hmm. Andhra Pradesh is supporting these fisher women for the market, also for the training and everything. So as a NGO under socio-economic, we have given one program to one of our branches, and they are doing successfully. The problem is only because it is a livelihood thing, so sometimes it has a problem
dyeing those seeds or something like that. So that is the only problem. Otherwise, the units are going very well.
Right, ma'am. So happy to talk to you about this, maybe post this session and understand what the problem and where we can come
No,
in.
it is not, there is no problem. I'm saying that the government is, whatever you said, that the NGO, the government and the finance, three things should come
Absolutely.
together. So here, Andhra Pradesh is supporting as a government, we are supporting as a NGO and also finance. So that is one of the example which we are running there.
Thank you, ma'am, for that example. And yeah, he wants to, I think we are done with thing. Please introduce yourself and we have 2 minutes, okay? 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. This is Muhammad Saeed, the Executive Director of Nahda Makers Organization. It is a national NGO based in Yemen. And we have maybe the similarities of situation in India, South Africa, and also Yemen. We are working in several sectors, in agriculture, in renewable energy, also providing some schools and health facilities, and also providing water for agriculture or water for using for people. Maybe that I think here, or when you talk about the experience in your countries, I think that locally produced, this is the issue happen in Yemen. As you know, since 2015, then starting the war, when you hear about the war in Yemen, Yemen, most of the solutions come from outside. This is the issue. So that always when we try to produce something from the locally people, it is what we can say, cutting and everything just come, the solutions from outside which cannot be adapted. Nowadays, we try to shift to this recovery, or we can do or produce something from the ground, but we have lacking of some experience or technical things that maybe the situation cannot support, because the education also is bad in Yemen, or most of the, more than 50 people was literacy, and we have a lot of issues in several sectors, so that this is one of the things maybe we can collaborate from several NGOs or countries about building the capacity or skills in several sectors. Especially, as you know, more than 50% of the Yemeni people, they are working in the agriculture and fisheries. It supports 70% of the population is living on those areas. And during the climate change also, climate change situation, there is a lot of floods, a lot of cyclones. It's destroyed most of the farms and also coastal areas. Maybe one question I want to ask here, if you can support in terms of how you collaborate between the CSOs, as your last question, and NGO and government and the markets or the private sector. What is the tips that you encourage them to come together to find solutions for those people?
I think it's a good question, but because we're running out of time, we have only 2 minutes left for the session to get over. We'll take this outside. We'd be happy to take this outside and discuss further on this. But a very valid point, and very happy to collaborate from our solutions to bring it to you and maybe learn from you all also in terms of water security, what you all are doing in terms of food security as well. So we'll take this outside. Thank you, Ahmed. Before I end, we've got last 2 minutes on the thing. INECC has been having this process of LDCs for NDCs for the last couple of years now. And we have just touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of what are those local solutions in different ecosystems and different regions. And we have created a kind of a website. The reason being is that we are talking about promoting these local solutions for access to finance, for access for organizations or countries like Yemen to learn from. What are the solutions that address food security, water security, energy efficiency, waste management, the circular economy, disaster risk reduction. And we've got a listing of, it's just very new now because we have just started it as a listing, and this will be built on as the days come and as we continue this process. The website, you can find it here at this, if you scan this code, you will see the link on that, and click on it, you'll see a couple of different kinds of solutions. And hoping to hear from you all, if you all would like to contribute to them also, the process, and see how else we can take this forward to create a sustainable, climate-proof communities that we are working with. So on that note, I will end here, and I want to thank our panelists and who have brought a whole flavor of different solutions and different kinds of challenges, yes, but also ways that we could look forward to, seeing how the work that happens on the ground feeds into the NDCs, and that's going to be our next step now. How do we feed into this the NDC process to these recommendations that you have, and looking at a bottom-up approach, I think all of us agree that this is the way to go. And if we're looking at net zero countries and net zero India, or a net zero South Africa, net zero Yemen, a bottom-up approach is the way to go. And how we're going to do it, I think we've already started the ball rolling now. And thank you all for being a part of this process, and we're looking forward to engaging more with you all as the days come and after COP as well. So thank you, and thank you to the UNFCCC team for this fantastic setup without any glitches. So thank you guys. Just in time.
Exit on time.
Well done.